My introduction is welcome to the Ohio Family Engagement Leadership Summit. We are glad that you could join us on this day of professional learning meant to take family school community partnerships to the next level. My name is Tricia Fitzgerald and I will be this session's moderator. This is session number 14, Connections for Families with Children who are deaf, hard of hearing, or blind, visually impaired. If you have any questions or concerns or technical issues, please message me privately in the chat. To ensure that all get the most out of today, we ask that participants turn off their webcams and their microphones, which it looks as though you've done an exceptional job at that. If you have any questions for the presenter, please use the chat feature and I'll pass them along at the appropriate time. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. I'm sure you've heard this before. Be sure to use the hashtag OHSummit23 to share your thoughts. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce your speaker today, Michelle. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michelle Montiel. And yes, please feel free to put comments in the chat. I'm going to pause routinely throughout the presentation so the chat can be summarized and just to see if there are any questions. And then we'll have general Q&A at the end. So, as I said, my name is Michelle Montiel, and I work at Ocali in their Outreach Center for Deafness and Blindness as the Family Support Liaison. I myself am deafblind, and so that gives me a unique perspective for my work. So I am going to teach you guys, hopefully, how to support families who have children with deafness or blindness. Just some quick background on myself. So when I was born with an autoimmune disease, and I wasn't, my parents didn't realize that I was going to have deafness or blindness until I was 18 months. I kept having persistent pink eye, and that ended up being uveitis, which is inflammation of the eyes. And then it turned out my ears were also being attacked. So I grew up as someone who was hard of hearing and visually impaired up until I was about 14. And then when I was 14, my autoimmune disease flared up badly and I lost all my hearing and all my vision. So I've experienced life partially sighted and hearing and then with none at all. I can hear you right now because I'm listening through cochlear implants. I have 2 of them. And I did most of the things that other children did. I did dance. I did cheerleading. I did sports. I went to college. I got my license to be a high school English teacher, and I lived on my own for 5 years. I got my job at Ocali. I've been working for Ocali for more than 5 years now, and here we are today. So I do use a lot of my experience to complement my work. And also, since I am deafblind, I use a screen reader, which is a piece of assistive technology. And for demonstration purposes, and so that you don't think I'm staring off into the ether, you may hear my screen reader from time to time. So now I would love to launch a poll for you guys so that I have a little bit of an idea as to who my audience is. I just want to know, do you know of a child who is deaf, hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, or deafblind? And then we'll launch another poll too, so that I can see if you're a family member or an educator. And then we'll summarize these results.
Okay, so far we have 6 out of 10 know a child who is deaf, hard of hearing. 4 out of 10 know a child who is blind, visually impaired. And 1 out of 10 is a family member. 1 out of 10 is an administrator. 4 out of 10 are intervention specialists. And 6 out of 10 are other.
Okay, interesting. So we have somebody from a little bit of everything except for combined deafness and blindness. Okay, that's
Yes.
cool. hmm Thank you very much for answering that poll. That helps. So we'll cover some of this in a little bit, but okay, I'd like to draw your attention to my PowerPoint presentation now. I do have a PowerPoint, and it is sort of going to work as your handout as well. All of the resources and stuff that I'm going to talk about should be accessible through a link from the PowerPoint presentation. If it is not for whatever reason, please feel free to let me know. And I have lots of different formats of this presentation, so I will make sure the links are accessible and work. So I am quickly going to do an overview on Ocali and the Outreach Center, and then we'll launch into the meat of this presentation. Flipping. Okay. Okay, Ocali. It stands for Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence, but we prefer to just say Ocali. And we believe that people with disabilities should have the opportunity and the access to grow and live their best life. We do this by inspiring change and promoting access. We try to do this by affecting policy, partnering with people, and practicing what we preach. And we also have several centers that address the lifespan of special needs. So we have the Autism Center, the Lifespan Transition Center, the Diverse Learning Center, the Ocali Lending Library, Assistive Technology and Accessible Educational Materials, Office of Policies, the Outreach Center for Deafness and Blindness, Center for the Young Child. We pretty much have the entire lifespan represented within these centers. Now, the Outreach Center in particular, which is where I work, that's my center, we try to build Ohio's capacity to serve families and their children with deafness or blindness wherever they are. So that, for example, if their child wanted to attend their neighborhood home school district, that the family and the school, everyone will feel comfortable with that. So you don't have to send them to the Ohio State School for the Blind or the Ohio State School for the Deaf. The Outreach Center can support school districts and families where they are. But some kids do need to go to the State School for the Deaf or the State School for the Blind or some other educational placement. Our goal is just to serve professionals and families where they are. Okay, so that's the Outreach Center. Now, here are the objectives for this presentation. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to describe how Ohio's systems work together to support families with children who are blind, visually impaired, or deaf, hard of hearing. You should be able to list at least 3 support strategies to support these families and identify at least 3 resources that can support access for those unique students. Okay, so support strategy number 1, if we can go to that slide. Okay, so Ohio has 4 big systems that work together to support families, and that is the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Education, Ohio Board of Developmental Disabilities, and Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. They all work together to serve children and families with special needs. So you should see on the PowerPoint a table, and I'm not sure if 2 of the tables were included or just 1, but we have 2 tables. One is from birth to age 3, and the other one is school age. And the table clearly outlines who is doing what, where, and when. And I want to show you the Mad Ed Connections resource guide where this table is located, because you may have questions about the things you are reading in the table, and the guide can help answer some of those questions, such as who are these professionals and where can I find them? So I'm going to try to share my screen, and this is my screen reader named Joss. Zoom meeting. Start screen share. Share sound checkbox button check the check press space bar. Select sharing sound button menu to activate. Optimize for visual clip checkbox button optimize for visual clip learn more button escape Zoom meeting 4 options for chat button menu to activate press space bar. Alt S Zoom start screen share. This will stop other screen sharing. Phone button to activate. Okay. My Jaws told me I was successful. We're going over to our favorite browser, or mine anyway, which is Google. So www.deafandblindoutreach.org is our website. So the family engagement section is my portion of the website that I try to keep updated, and that's where you will find the Mad Ed Connections resource guides. Let's look at deaf, hard of hearing as an example, because so these are low incident disabilities. However, deafness and hard of hearing is a higher low incident disability than someone with blindness or visual impairment. So that means you are a little bit more likely to encounter someone who's deaf, hard of hearing. So that is why I'm going to share with that one. Family engagement for deaf and hard of hearing. So we have early intervention, recreation, and leisure, which is very important. And here's my Mad Ed Connections resource guide. The goal of this resource is to explain how the medical field and the educational field intersect, which they do, and they can complement each other and work together. So there's a table of contents at the top. It is an extensive table of contents. And a lot of these tabs open up into other tabs, and it's organized by questions. So we often have questions, and here's where you can find some answers. Here's where you can download the Mad Ed booklet. So it condenses all of this internet information into an easy to print free booklet. But what I want to show you is the steps from screening to service table. So one reason it is organized by age is because you can be identified or diagnosed at any point in your life journey. Not everyone finds out at birth or as a toddler or maybe even later on in life. So deafness or hearing loss or visual impairment can happen at any time, and that's why we made those tables the way we did. So here are the steps. Hearing screening. So as you may know, there's a newborn infant hearing screening, but there is not an equivalent for blind, visually impaired. I want you to know that there are similar tables for blind and visually impaired if you just go to the blind, visually impaired family engagement section. The steps are very similar, except different professionals and some of the screening tools would look different. So I'm looking at the who. If you are a family member or a school team, some of these professionals may be unfamiliar to you. You can go throughout the guide and find out more about who those professionals are. There's information specifically about what happens, and then what agencies are like in the lead for each step. So as you can see in the early years, it's largely the Ohio Department of Health and DODD. So as we are looking at these tables, some things that I just want to bring your attention to. If your family needs Department of Developmental Disability Services, I really encourage you to encourage your families to sign up for that as soon as possible. Whether that's an individualized service plan or anything to do with waivers or anything to do with direct service providers, because there may be a wait period, and it's not certain how long that wait period will be. So if you think you need those DD services, sign up as early as you can. And then also, Opportunities for Ohio with Disability is a vocational rehabilitation career and employment training agency. And a lot of people, sometimes they think that, oh, we shouldn't bring transition-related agencies in until age 14. That's not necessarily true. I think you can start transition skills at any age, and it might behoove you to contact Opportunities for Ohio with Disabilities as soon as possible so that adult skill learning can begin as soon as possible. And we learn these skills as children. There's just some things to consider there. So as I was saying, some of these professionals may be unfamiliar. I want to show you another portion of this guide so you can find out more. I think that you have an idea about my screen reader now, so I'm going to replug it in. Okay, preparing for your doctor visit. Professional team members. So not everyone is aware of the professionals who are out there to support a student and their family. So this can highlight some team members for you to consider. So for example, let's check out I'm sorry, I'm reading. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so for example, there are two kinds of audiologists, which is a person that supports things like cochlear implants and hearing aids and listening and speaking. So an educational audiologist could explain to a school team how a child could have listening access in the classroom. A clinical audiologist would help maintain hearing aid equipment and so on and so forth, and it's more likely to be found in a clinical setting or a hospital. So a school might be more interested in pulling in an educational audiologist. And some of these professional team members you can find at educational service centers. So they might have an educational audiologist or a teacher of students with visual impairments or a teacher of the deaf. So educational service centers, hospitals, and also the outreach center, we have a provider directory so that you can look at your school district and your surrounding area and see, oh, there are teachers of the deaf around in my area. So we're going to leave this resource and go to the Outreach Center's webpage. And then you have to go to another menu at the top. We've split our website up. So there's blind and visually impaired. And both blind, visually impaired, and deaf, hard of hearing are organized the same. Language and literacy, basics, family engagement, assessment, transition. But if you go to the bottom of this menu, you should see resources. And here we have our statewide provider of directories. So a school administrator or a family member could look at So these include the service providers that are available in your area. These don't include every single service provider ever. We are collecting information and updating this as we go. So if you know of any providers who work with deaf, hard of hearing, or blind, visually impaired, I encourage you to encourage them to put their contact information in here. Okay. I'm going to flip back to my presentation and see where I am. I kind of skipped through support strategy number 2. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. We covered that. Let's go on to support strategy number 3, which is frame assessments as solutions. So, we are always performing assessments, evaluations, doing testings for our families and for that student. It can seem really overwhelming and like, why do we have to do all this? So I encourage you to frame this as a solution. The reason why we are doing all these evaluations and assessments is to collect data. And that data will help the school team, which includes the family. It will help them figure out what are the areas of needs and what are the strengths. And once we have that information, then we can start planning what supports and services will fill those need gaps and provide more access to education. And so I tried to do a little formula that I thought made sense. Assessments plus evaluations plus data equals picture of strengths and needs. Data plus supports and services equals a solution. So that is one step. There are specific assessments for our unique population. And I'm not sure that everyone is aware that these are available. They are available. We know what these assessments are. We have things like the functional listening evaluation. The functional listening evaluation would be something that an audiologist would likely perform. And it would just give information on how does the student best acquire information in the classroom. Assistive technology assessments. So students with disabilities can often access the curriculum and activities with assistive technology. There is special assistive technology available for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, and blind, visually impaired. What are those, and what might be most appropriate? We have a lot of guidelines also that go into details and depths about the assessments out there. These are all tools and resources that could be appropriate for a family member or a professional to share with the school team so that everyone can be on the same page. It should outline what the assessments are, who performs them, and what you will get out of it data-wise. So, a big example is the learning media assessment for students who are blind or visually impaired. That is an assessment that helps determine what is their best mode of reading. So yes, assessments are really important. Let's move on to the next slide. It's not enough for something to just be available. It also needs to be accessible. So for example, a public bathroom is available, but is it accessible for people with disabilities? The biggest access barrier for students who are deaf, hard of hearing is access to language and communication. The biggest access barrier for students who are blind and visually impaired is reading print. How are they going to get a job and partake in school and recreation and leisure if they can't talk to one another and they can't read? So these are very important to make barriers to try to overcome and provide access for. And then an access barrier for both of them is incidental learning. And I am curious as to whether anyone has heard that term before. Do you know what incidental learning is? If you do, I'd love to hear your answer in the chat. We're going to cover that in a little bit. Right now, I'm going to try to give you some options for providing access to some of these barriers. So first is language and communication. So language is not the same thing as communication. Animals can communicate. Dogs can communicate with each other without talking, right? They wag their tail when they're happy. They lower their tail when they're sad. There's growling, please don't pet me. You can communicate without talking. So, communication is more about modes. Language, on the other hand, is English or American Sign Language. So the three language options for a student who is deaf, hard of hearing are English, American Sign Language, or both, which is called being bilingual or bimodal. Other countries have their own unique sign language. So American Sign Language, and then there's British Sign Language. It's not universal. It's specific to each country. And then the difference, again, between language and communication. So communication can look different for someone who's deaf, hard of hearing. There are several different forms of assigned language. There's signing exact English, which is where you use the sentence and grammar structure of English, but you're using sign language, American Sign Language vocabulary. So, for example, in sign language, American Sign Language, you set up the tree. We're going to say the boy climbs the tree. You would set up your tree first, and then you would make your person sign, and then the boy sign, and you would show that person climbing up the tree. Well, so another option could be signing exact English, when you would say, the boy climbed the tree. But in ASL, they don't use the and to and was. So that's signing exact English. There's also pigeon signed English, which is using ASL, American Sign Language vocabulary, but in an English order. So I'm not saying to and the, but I might say, The boy, he climbed the tree. So, and that tends to be easier for signing and talking. And so those were several modes of communicating. Other modes include talking, lip reading, listening, which is typically done through hearing assistive technology, and communication boards, writing. So yes, there are lots of ways to communicate your language. And as professionals, we should be helping those families make those decisions and find out what their options are. It's important that families know that they can change their mind. It doesn't have to be set in stone. You can try a variety of strategies, and depending on what situation or circumstance you are in, might depend on the communication mode being used. One of our excellent resources that we have is called the Communication Planning Guide, and it really helps you think about how is a deaf, hard of hearing student going to access communication at school. For example, I have to take my implants out when I go swimming. That means I'm completely deaf and completely blind. So how am I going to do that? How am I going to join the swim team? So we made a communication plan so that I could still participate. And that is using a combination of sign language, so finger spelling and doing some sign into my hand, and maybe using a tapping system so that I don't crash into the wall. And that way I can communicate with my coach and be safe all at once. Or even, let's say we're having a fire drill. It is very loud when those sirens are going off. What if that student who is deaf or hard of hearing can't hear the teacher when she's trying to give directions as how do we fulfill this fire drill safely? That's where the communication planning guide would come in. It would help your team plan for those types of circumstances and scenarios. Okay. We have American Sign Language resources. We get asked for that all the time. That is my alarm. That means this is 1:20 and we have not so much longer to go. So I am going to talk a little bit faster. We have some American Sign Language resources. You should be able to find all of this in your PowerPoint, and they are all free. We are big fans of free. And if you want to not do this online, then we also can point you in the right direction for learning in person. Often like a deaf services center, community service for the deaf. And we have a list of where those centers and services are in your area. Need them. Okay, moving right along. Support strategy number 5. Provide access to print. Particularly for students, there are a lot of free resources out there for Braille, and large print, and just accessible formats. The federal quota. So if you have any students who are blind or visually impaired, I highly encourage you to register for the federal quota as soon as possible. So that way all the textbooks, all the articles and materials that are used in class will be ready for that student by the beginning of the school year. And federal quota it's just a really great resource. And then also there is Bookshare. I adore Bookshare. It has a built-in magnification screen reader software. So that is really cool. And you can also download it in Braille, and they also have human narrator. For students, that is free. Once you're an adult, you pay $50. National Library Service for the blind and physically impaired. They are also a really excellent source. They have Braille, they have audiobooks, and they are free to everyone who is blind, visually impaired, or have some kind of reading barrier. So there is stuff out there. They may also need assistive technology. So deafness and blindness operates on a spectrum. So you may identify as blind or deaf, but you may have a little bit of vision. And so you can enhance that vision by using assistive technology. The Ocali Lending Library has a lot of that stuff that you can try out on trial for free before buying it, because it can sometimes be pricey. And there are local supports out there for funding if you are interested. And we have some examples on our webpage on what is that technology. So FM systems for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, screen readers for people who are blind, visually impaired, like I'm using a screen reader right now. Nowadays, a lot of technology comes pre-made with screen readers. So Apple products and Android products, all of them come with VoiceOver automatically installed. So it will talk back to you, and that is free. And that's super good for families and students to know. They should be able to use the phone as well. Okay, let's go on to support strategy number 6. Help families support their child's life skills. So I mentioned a while ago, incidental learning is one of the access barriers that kids with sensory needs often face. Does anyone know what is incidental learning? You can unmute, drop in the chat, or else I'm just going to assume you're not sure.
We had one response that incidental learning is the learning that happens through observation and overhearing things. It is the opposite of explicit instruction. It is learning by observing, hearing, and exploring the world around you.
Yes. And this is something that's correct, that we often take for granted. So did your mom and dad explicitly teach you how to make a sandwich, or did you just pick that up? Were you explicitly taught how to make friends, or you just kind of were able to? Or how about resolving arguments and conflicts? Or even, I'll provide some more concrete examples. Growing up, I didn't understand, so I was singing and I was dancing right along with everyone else, but I didn't get, how does everyone know when to dance and when to sing at the same time? I just could not understand. I could not get it. I relied on someone to tell me through a microphone, go, 1, 2, 3, go, 1, 2, 3, dance. It took me until high school to realize that people were counting to the beat of the song. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is when everyone knows when to go. They're doing it to the beat of the song. Or like, there's a kindergarten readiness test that I had to do when growing up. They asked me questions like, what does peanut butter come in? What is a pumpkin? And I thought to myself, what on earth? Peanut butter comes within itself. What a silly question. She wanted me to say it came in a jar or a container. But I didn't hear anyone say, get the jar of peanut butter. Most people say, get the peanut butter. They didn't explicitly say, go get the jar, the container. So I eventually said, it comes in Jif, because it says Jif on the side. And what is a pumpkin? Oh, goodness, I don't know. I never heard the word squash before, so I said, it's jack-o'-lantern. Small things like that. So, our students who have these sensory challenges, they need to be explicitly and purposefully taught how to do some of these things. And there is research and evidence that indicates that they do much better post-graduation and are more likely to graduate. They will be mentally and socially healthier and are more likely to make good achievements if these things are addressed. And so in order to help with that, the expanded core curriculum has been developed for both of these students. There's one for blind, visually impaired, and there's one for deaf, hard of hearing. We sadly don't have a lot of time to go through all of these. But some include orientation and mobility. So how are these blind, visually impaired students going to be navigating school in their home and their community independently? Social interaction skills. If they haven't seen someone or heard them properly collaborate with others, how are they going to learn to do it themselves? Or even when dating, are do you explicitly teach how to date? Most people do not. So, social interactions like that. Or careers, the careers that are out there and available for them, especially for children with disabilities, they are not aware of all of the options that are out there for them or how they could do it. So how could I possibly be a teacher as I am deaf and blind? Well, I still definitely can. So just explicitly teaching things like that. And we have a lot of resources on this. This is one of my big passionate topics. So we have the expanded core curriculum. Those are clickable. You can find out what those are. There are about 9 skills for each. And we also have the Yes We Can Journey Towards Independence series. These are short little videos featuring myself. And the topics that I have so far is access and audiology. You get to watch me go to a doctor's appointment. Orientation and mobility. I have a guide dog. So how do people operate with a service animal and using a cane? Living independently in a shared space. I had roommates for a long time. Assistive technology for daily living. We don't just use it in school. So I encourage you guys to check those out and consider incorporating them. Okay, this is our last strategy, and maybe the most important one. Embrace learning together. Not one person knows everything, but together we can figure it all out. I know that it can be really daunting. Not everyone, again, it's a low incident thing. So the uncertainty may be daunting, but let's get confident. Please feel free to reach out to us. We also offer customizable training. So you can contact us and say, we really like to be trained on this specific thing. We will either come to your school or your house or do it virtually. So there's that. There's also ask our staff. If you just have a quick question, plug in that quick question. We'll get back to you ASAP. We also have free online professional development learning. So do you need credits? You can get your credits online for free if you just make a free account. That's our online learning hub. And then another thing we have, which is cool, is the promoting access module. I really like it as a novice introductory tool for professionals. If you just have no familiarity whatsoever, it is a really good beginner's learning tool. And it's also good, I think, for families as well. So now we're at ways to keep in touch. You can email me. You can fill out that Ask Our Staff. And we are also on social media. So we do have a Facebook and a Twitter and Instagram and all of that. Yeah. And there we are. I got through the entire thing. Hooray. So now I'd like to turn our attention to the chat. And any questions or comments, you guys can feel free to unmute or put things in the chat. See how much time we have left. 1:31 p.m. Yep, we do have time.
Any comments or questions, you can either drop them in the chat or unmute.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, in that case,
Well, we
If there
have
are
two
no,
comments. I really
okay,
appreciate having these resources now. I'm excited to share with my team. Thank you very much.
I'm
And the
excited for
second
you to share with your
comment,
team.
oh, sorry. Second comment, thanks so much for sharing the information and your personal experiences. A third comment, thank you for the resources.
Okay, good, cool. I'm excited for you guys to check it out yourselves and to share it as well. And if you have any problems getting access to the resources, please let me know. And I suppose if there are no other questions or burning comments, please enjoy the rest of the summit.
Yes, if this is the final session that you will be attending at today's summit, please complete the survey. We ask that you only take the survey once, so please do not take the survey until after the final session that you attend for the day. And thank you, Michelle, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
You're
There will
very
now
welcome.
be a break until 2 o'clock. If this is your final session, please be sure to take the survey. And we ask that you only take it once. The next session will begin at 2. And remember to keep the conversation going on Twitter using the hashtag OHSummit23 and visit ohiofamiliesengaged.osu.edu/summit for all information about today's events. Well, we do have one question from Melissa. Have you worked with any DHH students who use AAC devices?
Is that so? The communication device? Yeah. So I personally have not, because I'm not a teacher of the deaf and I'm not currently in the classroom. But I know that, yes, they do use that. It is used before, especially because the student might know some American Sign Language, but that doesn't mean that their friends or their family do. So sometimes that is needed.
Melissa says thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to stick around until everyone leaves.
Okay. Yeah, if there are no other comments, you are all free to go and take your break until the 2 o'clock session.